As Gabi's sword struck down the witch, her illusion shattered, dissipating like mist in the morning light. The once vivid nightmares that had plagued the swamp faded away, leaving only the grim reality behind. Outside the hut, the massive bear that had been terrorizing the gang began to weaken, its strength sapped by the death of its master. Oren, sensing the beast's vulnerability, seized the moment. With a determined cry, he plunged his spear deep into the bear's chest, aiming for its heart. The spear struck true, driving through thick muscle and bone until it pierced the creature's heart. The bear let out a low, agonized growl as the spear punctured its lungs, causing its breath to come in ragged, desperate gasps. Osama, seeing the opportunity to end the fight once and for all, gathered every ounce of strength he had left. He raised his hammer high above his head and brought it down with all his might onto the bear's skull. The blow landed with a sickening crunch, shattering the already cracked bones of the bear's head. Blood began to pour from the bear's wounds, a dark stream running down its face and pooling on the ground below. The mighty beast, once so fearsome and relentless, was now on the brink of death. Its massive body swayed as its strength ebbed away, and its eyes, once filled with primal fury, began to glaze over. Harun, his face grim with determination, stepped forward. With a final decisive stroke, he drove his sword deep into the bear's neck, severing the last remnants of life from the creature. The bear let out one last shuddering breath, its body trembling as it collapsed to the ground. The primal fury that had driven it was finally laid to rest, and the swamp fell silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. The gang stood around the fallen beast, their breaths coming in heavy gasps, their bodies aching from the fight. Bloodied and exhausted, they watched as the life drained from the bear's eyes, knowing that they had overcome a great and terrible force. Oren pulled his spear from the bear's chest, the weapon slick with blood. He looked at the others, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "It's done," he said, his voice hoarse from the strain. "The beast is dead." Osama lowered his hammer, his arms trembling from the effort. He looked down at the fallen bear, then up at his comrades, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "We did it," he murmured. "It's finally over." Harun nodded, wiping the blood from his sword before sheathing it. He looked around at the gang, his eyes reflecting the gravity of what they had just accomplished. The gang stood in silence for a moment, taking in the weight of their victory. The swamp, once filled with the witch's dark magic and illusions, was now still and quiet. The danger had passed, but the scars of the battle would remain with them forever.
Raja, still catching his breath, stepped forward, his voice quiet but resolute. "We fought well, and we fought together. That's what matters." Tariq nodded, then walked over to the fallen bear and gripped the hilt of Gabi's sword, which was still lodged in the beast's neck. With a firm tug, he pulled the blade free, the metal slick with blood. Tariq then turned and headed toward the hut, where Gabi had gone to face the witch, the others following close behind. As they entered the dimly lit hut, they found Gabi standing in the center of the room, his back to them. His shoulders were tense, and though he quickly wiped his face, it seemed as if there had been tears in his eyes. The group stood in silent respect, understanding the weight of the moment. Osama, with his deep, steady voice, finally broke the silence. "You did it, Hunter. You killed the witch." Gabi remained silent for a moment, then turned to face them. He took his sword from Tariq and handed back the short sword with a nod of thanks. "Our work isn't done yet," he said quietly. "We haven't found the children." With a heavy heart, Gabi cleaned his sword and sheathed it. "Stay vigilant. Keep your guard up. We still might not be safe." The group began searching the hut, looking for any clues that might lead them to the missing children. The place was a grotesque collection of dark magic. Skulls, candles, and strange artifacts littered the room. Human hair and nails were scattered among the objects, and in one corner, Gabi found a trunk filled with children's clothing. The sight made his stomach turn, but he pressed on, determined to find the truth. They searched every corner of the hut, but found nothing that could lead them to the children. Just as despair began to creep in, Tariq noticed something odd, a large rug on the floor that seemed out of place. He moved it aside, revealing a carefully sealed door in the floor. "Tariq," Gabi called out as he approached, What is it? Tariq knelt down beside the door, inspecting it closely. It's a door, made of wood like the floor, but it's sealed with mud around the edges. Someone wanted to hide it. The mud was almost dry, but Gabi was able to pry open the door with his knife. As the door swung open, a terrible stench hit them all at once. The unmistakable odor of decaying flesh mixed with blood and other foul scents. The group recoiled, covering their noses against the overwhelming smell. Gabi led the way down into the dark, narrow basement. The scene that greeted them was horrific. The carcasses of children lay strewn across the floor, their small bodies twisted in death. Gabi's heart sank as he took in the grisly sight. How many children went missing? Gabi asked Osama, who was right behind him. Osama's voice was choked with emotion. 6 or 7, Hunter. No more than that. The others filed into the basement, and the grim reality of the situation hit them all at once. Tariq was the last to enter, his face pale as he took in the scene. Gabi moved further into the room, trying to make sense of the horror before him. Near the wall, something caught his eye, an object covered with a rug. He approached it cautiously and pulled the rug away. There, lying lifeless on the cold floor, was Lila. Tariq broke down, tears streaming down his face as he rushed to her side. Harun quickly moved to support him, his own eyes filling with tears. The pain of the loss was palpable in the small, dark space. Gabi, his heart heavy, knelt beside Lila's body and carefully removed the shackles that bound her. With great care, Gabi lifted Lila's small, fragile body into his arms. The group solemnly ascended from the basement and made their way out of the hut. As the group emerged from the witch's hut, the weight of their grim discovery still heavy on their hearts, Gabi paused at the threshold, looking back at the dark, twisted structure. The air was thick with the stench of death and dark magic, a place tainted by the witch's malevolence. This was not a place that could be left standing. Gabi turned to Oren and Osama, his voice resolute. This hut is a blight on the land. We can't leave it standing. Burn it down. Oren nodded, understanding the necessity. He and Osama pulled out their torches, lighting them from the small flame Osama had kept in his lantern. With a steady hand, they approached the hut's wooden walls. Oren thrust his torch into the dry, brittle wood, the flames eagerly catching and beginning to spread. Osama followed suit, setting fire to the other side of the hut. The flames crackled and roared, quickly consuming the structure that had harbored so much darkness. The group stood back, watching as the fire grew, the flames dancing high into the night sky. The heat was intense, and the orange glow cast long shadows on their faces as they watched the witch's lair burn. The crackling of the fire was the only sound, a final act of cleansing as the last remnants of the witch's evil were consumed by the flames. Gabi remained silent, his eyes fixed on the inferno. The fire burned bright and fierce, a fitting end for the place that had caused so much suffering. As the flames began to die down, Gabi turned away, the light from the fire reflecting off his determined expression. They found a dry spot nearby, and Oren and Osama began digging a grave. The others stood in silence, their hearts weighed down by grief. When the grave was ready, Gabi gently laid Lila's body into the earth. The group stood around the small grave, a quiet sorrow filling the air. Oren, his voice low and solemn, spoke the words that captured the heartache of the moment. Children, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in it, are like flowers, fragile and full of life, drawn to what shines, to what tempts. But in their innocence, they can't see the dangers that hide in the shadows. It is our duty as elders to protect them, to guide them, to keep them safe from the darkness that seeks to snatch them away. The group nodded in agreement, their heads bowed in respect and mourning. After a moment of silence, they slowly turned and began their journey back to the village. They had faced the darkness and defeated the witch, but the cost had been high. As they walked, each of them carried with them the weight of what they had seen, the memories of those lost, and the determination to protect the village from any future threats.